Good afternoon, everyone. It's time to get started with this webinar. This is a webinar in a series of webinars. It's the second one, to be precise. And you can see the title there, 30 Years of Preflight Gave Us What? It sounds a little bit negative. I think by the end of the webinar, I will be able to convince you that it's both positive and negative, and that the things that are negative, perhaps we can change if we really wanted to. So let's get this show on the road. I'll start with this. This is a slide of Ghent, our beautiful castle. There are two reasons I have this on here. The first one is that I was born in Ghent, I've lived there all my life, and I worked there all my life. Starting in 1996, I worked at Enfocus. I co-founded a company called Gradual Software that created Switch. I worked at Enfocus again. I spent a lot of years as the CTO of 4Ps, a value-added distributor. That is the main distributor for the callas solutions. And now I'm chief evangelist at callas. Of course, callas is not a Belgian company. They are a German company out of Berlin, but I still spend most of my time in beautiful Ghent. The second reason that Ghent is important is for the Ghent work group, originally called the Ghent PDF work group. That was founded in Ghent, actually. The first meetings were in the Achtervelde Hogeschool here in Ghent, so in one of the higher education facilities that cater to pre-press and production training. And the Ghent work group has existed since 2002. I've been a member since its inception. Had various positions. I'm now executive director of that group. And of course, when you talk about Preflight, the Ghent PDF work group is an important entity. And we'll hear of it again during this presentation. So what I want to do is, a little bit facetiously, I want to summarize the first webinar in this series in about 2 slides. So that webinar was given by Dietrich von Zechen, the callas Software CEO, and it talked about PDF standards. And as you can see in the title, why you can't afford to ignore them. And what Dietrich did was give an overview of standards related to PDF and then explain what these are, why they are important, how they work together, and so on. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. You can re-watch it by scanning the QR code or by simply going to the YouTube channel for callas Software. Let's summarize it. 2 slides. The first one is about the content of that webinar. And what is important there is that if you are in our market segment, in our market, then you kind of live in this landscape of PDF standards. PDF by itself is a standard, ISO 32000. PDFX is a subset standard that was created by ISO specifically for graphic cards. So it adds a number of restrictions on top of PDF to make the PDF files, the PDFX file, more usable for graphic arts. And then organizations such as the Ghent work group have invented something that they called PDFX Plus. And what that means is simply PDFX with all of its requirements, plus a number of additional requirements on top. And then conceivably, you could think of a 4th layer where each company could add their own laws and regulations on top of the PDFX Plus specifications from the Ghent work group. So talking about the things that are relevant for this presentation when we want to talk about Preflight, this is a very short summary of all of the content of the first webinar that Dietrich did. I do want to make a second slide, and the reason for that is that there are 2 conclusions from Dietrich's webinar that I think are relevant for what we're going to talk about today. The first one is the fact that standardization works. And you could ask that as a question, but I think that if we look at what happens, if you look at the workflows that people build over the years, if you look at the evolution that we've gone through since the inception of the PDFX standard around 2000 till now, then the only conclusion we can come to is that standardization does actually work, that it is important, and that it is important for you as a printer or a publisher to understand what standards there are and to best use them. So that's one. The second conclusion can be stated positively or negatively, and I have the positive one here. Automation means standardization. You could also say standardization means automation. I think most people would recognize this in its negative form. No standardization means no automation. Yeah? And so the point here obviously is that all of these standardization efforts are important because they allow someone to automate the workflows that they have. But we want to talk about Preflight, and I'm not going to go through the whole history. I'm also not going to go into a lot of practical details about Preflight. That will be more for webinar number 3. But I do want to talk about why are we still Preflighting? Have things changed over the years? Is there anything that is different now? So I want to talk more about conceptual issues. And for starters, we know that Preflight comes out of the aviation history, and that it means that you are going to check a plane before it takes off. And why do you do that? For the same reason that we want to Preflight often and early in our market. That is, that errors that you catch while you're still on the ground are less costly than errors that you see while you're in the air. If you translate that to our world, it means that if you can intercept a wrong PDF file as soon as the customer uploads it, versus a file that goes through plate making or printing or finishing or shipping and actually arriving at the customer, the earlier in the process you stop problems, the less money it is going to cost you in the end. And that is a very important point. Yeah? That is why we Preflight, it is why we Preflight often, and why we want to try and Preflight as early in the process as possible. Okay, so what does that mean, Preflight? What are the things that we are checking? And conceivably, you can think of 3 different types of Preflight. The third one has a little bit more to do with creative aspects, and I'm going to ignore it largely today. I'm going to focus today on 2 different types of Preflight that we can do. First one being technical Preflight. And technical Preflight means that you look at the PDF, you look at all of the properties of the PDF, and you decide whether that PDF is going to be good for print. If you have a PDF like this, if it looks like this and you print it, is it going to look the same or is it going to look completely different? In this case, if you don't embed all of the proper fonts in the PDF might print, but it might look very different because the font is approximated by the printer, or it's substituted with a different font, or something like that. And so technically the PDF file is not in order to be printed. That is what I refer to as technical Preflight, and it can largely be performed in isolation. And that is very different from the second concept, what I call intent Preflight, and trust me, the terminology is not standardized. I like to call this intent Preflight, but you can call it whatever you want. The thing is, intent Preflight is no longer in isolation. You look at the PDF file, and then you look at the metadata for the order that that PDF file is for. And so that's what I have on the right hand side. I have something, this happens to be a JSON fragment, and this could come from a web to print system, it could be data from a database, it could come from an MIS. In any case, wherever it comes from, I have information that tells me that I should have 4 pages in this job, number of pages 4, and I should have an A4 job, and I can see that at the horizontal page size and vertical page size. So if I know from the order information that I need a 4-page A4 PDF file, then I can now Preflight that PDF that I received, make sure it has 4 pages, and make sure it's an A4. So I compare the characteristics of the PDF against the order intent if you want. And so intent preflight. Yeah. So those are the two types of preflight I'm going to focus on, and that I refer to when I talk about preflight today is technical preflight, where you look at the PDF file more or less in isolation and you look at the technical characteristics, and then intent preflight, where you look at the PDF file together with the metadata for the file. Let's take a step back and let's talk a little bit about history. And the reason I want to do that is because we have really cool data about preflight and quality and so on through a number of surveys that have been done over the years. And they have been done by vendors, they have been done by industry associations such as VIGC in Belgium or the Gantour Group, and they provide really interesting information. I'm not going to talk about all of it, but I am going to talk about this. This is a top 9. My OCD is slightly offended. It's only 9 and not 10. But this is the top 9 of common preflight problems. The question that was asked to people was, which problems do you commonly see in PDF files that come into your workflows? Yeah? And I'll give you the numbers. It's a top 9, so it's not surprising that the top item appears the most. The percentage, of course, is rather high, but what this means is that a lot of printers actually see low-res images as a problem. And so the first thing that I would like you to do is look at these things and make sure that what you see here would still be relevant today. I think if we take this information from 2017, that is when the survey was answered by people. If we place this next to similar questions in 2024 today, then the answers would probably not be very different. Yeah? Problems with low resolution images, we all recognize that. Problems with color spaces, that could be there is RGB in the file and I expected only CMYK, or I expected a black and white file and it has a bunch of full color in it. Bleed issues, still very relevant today. Wrong number of spot colors. Someone ordered a business card. I'm supposed to have 2 spot colors in there, and either I have none or I have 17 because someone didn't understand what spot colors were and how to create the correct swatches in InDesign or Illustrator. Also very common still, I think. Overprint problems don't really need a lot of explanation. Ink coverage, in the sense of there is too much ink in a document in order for it to be printed where it has to be printed, and this of course could be different from segment to segment, but there is too much ink. Incorrect trim size. Someone ordered a business card and they give me an A4 PDF. What am I supposed to do with that? And then transparency flattening errors, and this is one that I'm going to skip for now, but I will come back to in a second. And then problems with technical spot colors. And that last item sounds kind of mysterious, but it is not more difficult than I'm in large format or in label or wherever. I expect there to be a cut contour and there is no cut contour. So maybe I'm able to print this file, but I'm not able to finish it, to cut it afterwards. Okay, so relatively common issues, and issues that I think we can still pretty much identify with today. What is even more interesting than looking at this 2017 study is, and realizing that it's still very much the same today, is to look at this study and compare it to something older. And that is exactly what I've done in this table. Here you have a list of the top 10. I added the 10th item, so my OCD is happy. On the left-hand side, you have the top 10 for 2017. That's what we were just looking at, plus not embedded fonts on number 10. And then on the right-hand side, I have the same answers on a very, very similar question from 2008, so 10 years earlier. I'm going to make your life easier. I have changed this table so that it looks a lot uglier, but it also makes it much more easy to recognize the same items on both sides. So same colors is now same item. And what you can see is that almost all items of 2017 already existed in 2008. So not a lot of evolution in 10 years, perhaps. There are two things that I want to single out here, two topics that we need to talk about in a little bit more detail. And the first one is when you look at the top right item, not embedded fonts, that doesn't appear in 2017 until spot 10. So that kind of completely dropped away. If we'll answer the question in a second, did things improve in our industry? Not embedded fonts actually apparently did improve. Why is that? Why? Well, a lot of the technology that we are using today and already in 2017 is just a lot better than it was in 2008. And today it is relatively difficult to create a PDF file that doesn't have all fonts embedded. Don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of things that can go wrong with fonts in general, but it is very difficult to create a PDF file that doesn't have all the fonts embedded. So that item kind of disappeared to the bottom of the list. And then there is another very interesting change, and one that is reflected in the policy that the Gantour group uses and the messaging that we use surrounding which standards to use. Look at item number 5 on the right, transparency problems, and then look at the same colored item on number 8 on the left, transparency flattening problems. These are not the same items. Transparency problems in 2008 meant that someone had a PDF with live transparency and they sent it to the RIP, and the RIP did something that was completely wrong. Yeah? So those were problems with live transparency. In 2017, we don't have that issue anymore. Instead, we have an issue that is called transparency flattening problems. And so these are problems with PDF files that don't have live transparency, but that have been flattened, and the problems that they cause in a workflow, which is not surprising. Transparency flattening, I keep saying that, is a very difficult operation. It is time consuming. It breaks up objects in the file in multiple objects, so you can get alignment issues, you can get color management issues. It's just not something that you want to do. Yeah? This is reflected, like I said, in what the Gantour group has as advice. If you would have asked me in 2008 which PDFX standard should I use, then my answer would have been PDFX1A because of, amongst other things, but principally, transparency issues. Yeah, there were definitely problems in RIPs with live transparency, and so converting that to PDFX1A means that you don't have those issues because there is no longer live transparency in the file. That would have been my answer in 2008. If you ask me the same question today, and it would have been the same in 2017, but if you ask me that same question now, then my answer would be, please use PDFX4. Why? Well, because live transparency is by now well supported by RIPs. There is no issue anymore. Yeah? What is not well supported is flattened files, transparency flattening files. That still causes issues. The solution we had 10 years ago or 20 years ago is what now still causes issues, and we should stop doing transparency flattening, and we should more and more adapt PDFX4. There is no good reason today to not adapt PDFX4, and that's a double negative, so I'll translate it. There are very good reasons today to use PDFX4, just as an aside here. But so the conclusion from this slide could be that yes, there are some things that are different, and there are obviously some things that improved, which is important for the next slides. But there are also a whole bunch of issues that haven't changed very much in 10 years. And since we assumed or agreed, I hope you agreed, that 2017's issues are very similar to what we face today, then it seems like nothing much has changed, perhaps. So, is today better than the past, or have we spent 30 years and we have a status quo, or has it gotten worse? Well, There's a very simple way to answer the general question, have things improved or not? I am absolutely convinced that things have improved. And I have made a small list of things that I remember from my 30 years, close to, in Preflight and in standardization processes. And I'm sure if we would have this discussion around a beer, that we can come up with a lot more items like this. So remember Adobe PDF Writer, that used to be something that was a printer driver, if you wanted, that could generate PDF files, except that the quality was so bad that a lot of Preflight tools had rules that discarded files from, or flagged files that came from Adobe PDF Writer. Doesn't exist anymore today. Do you remember city fonts? No, that was something that Apple invented. Those were fonts that were optimized for screen use, and they typically had city names. There are two that I remember, but there's bound to have been a lot more. Geneva and Chicago are two examples. Yeah? And so the quality was really bad for print anyway, and so Preflight tools had rules to recognize and warn about the use of city fonts. How about OPI? Open Prepress Interface? No, this was the, for all the younger people in this webinar, this was the practice where you would create a PDF file with low-res images in it, and then you would have an OPI server, and that OPI server would replace the images with high-res variants. We don't do that anymore. Why? Well, because the whole problem went away. We no longer need to do this because workflows, hardware and software have become capable of handling high-res images directly, and so we don't need to deal with these OPI formats anymore. We also had a tendency of not just receiving PDF files, because we complained a lot about PDF files that we receive today, but obviously we only receive PDF files. Yeah? And what we, I think, tend to forget is how much more difficult life was when we didn't just receive PDF files, but we received Quark Express and PageMaker and FrameMaker, very nice applications that I remember fondly. But if someone gave you a PageMaker 5.6 file and you only had PageMaker 4, you had issues. So these open file formats that were commonly exchanged were, of course, not easier than the PDF we get today, let alone that I want to remember what it felt like to have to work with PostScript and EPS files. God forbid that something went wrong with those. Yeah? And then we had things like TIFF-IT and LWCT files. So there is a lot that improved in our workflows over the last 30 years. And I think that should be the first thing that you take away from this webinar, is that, yes, things did improve. The situation today is a lot better than the situation 30 years ago. Even though we might not remember all of these things, if I refresh your memory, I'm sure that a lot of you will say, yeah, okay, that wasn't great, was it? No, it wasn't. And the problems we have with PDF are nothing compared to some of the issues we had with all of that stuff. So who are the bad guys here? If we're saying situation has improved, but at the same time, I can show you a survey from 2008, and the items there, the things that were problematic then are still problematic today, then why is that? And I think we should look at technology for the answers to that, but we should also look at other reasons. And I want to end this webinar by talking about a number of the reasons that I think we still have issues. And you'll see that a lot of those can also be fixed if we would put our mind to it. At least that is my firm belief. The first one is people. We are the problem very, very often. And because, well, I am more, and probably most of you are more on the prepress and production side, and then it's very simple to blame the other half of our market, right, the creatives. I don't want to do that. I think there are issues with that. and there will always be for very good reasons. But I think we should begin by looking at ourselves. Yeah? There are today less and less technically skilled production people. And you can read this in two ways, and they are, I believe, both correct. The first thing that you can read in this is to say there are less and less people that are coming from the kind of universities or high schools where you get pre-press training or production training. And that is absolutely correct. If you would look at universities and high schools and you look at how many people graduated each year from these, call it pre-press areas, then the number of people per year has dramatically dropped. And there are all kinds of reasons for it. Amongst others, the fact that there are so many other interesting things that people can do today, and so the diversification is much higher. But there are definitely less and less skilled people that enter the workplace, and that is one way to read the sentence. The second way to read the sentence, we have to look a little bit more at ourselves, perhaps, and that is there are less and less technically skilled people. If you just look at the people who are involved in our industry, I think we should look at ourselves and say, okay, so when was my education? Do I still know all the things that I should know if I have a production job in this field, for example? And what I see when I give training is that there are definitely areas where our knowledge is not that strong. If I ask people, do you know PDFX? The answer is typically yes. If I ask them, so can you tell me the difference between PDFX 1A and PDFX 4? The answer is typically, I think I know, but it might be good that you explain it again. And I consider something like that very basic information if you're playing in our field. And so we shouldn't be afraid to look at ourselves and say, yeah, maybe there is a need for more training and more knowledge among the people who are responsible for pre-press and production workflows. But of course, the second point can't be denied either. We've always had the issue that there is a difference between the production people and the creative people. And that is almost by design, no pun intended, if you want. Production people are supposed to get good printed jobs out of a production workflow. The creative people are supposed to focus on making something that is creatively beautiful. And those are two very different things. And so it's not because you're good at one, it's not because you're good at creating things, that you're also necessarily good at knowing what you have to do to produce these things on the other side. There's a problem we always had. One of the best, I think, ads that I still remember to have seen in our industry is something that came out of a vendor that said read according to production and read according to designers. And one was a Pantone patch for a color, a shade of red, and the other one was a glass of red wine. Yeah? And I believe that really is an issue. On top of that, we're seeing a different issue. If I wanted to print a brochure for use in at a trade show 20 years ago, I probably would have gone to some kind of creative agency. They would have created something for me in InDesign or Quark Express, and then have sent it to a printer to get produced. If you need a brochure today, the chance is at least very high that someone inside the company, not an expert, is going to use a tool like Publisher or Adobe Express or Canva, and is going to make something in there and then just send it to a printer to be produced. So not only is there a lack of knowledge on the creative side, on the designer side, when it comes to pre-press issues, but in many cases these people are completely not involved anymore, and we have a shift in who actually creates the print jobs, and so the jobs we get are necessarily going to be not as technically good. Yeah? You can't always do the right thing in tools. And so I think what we need to do, we could say, yeah, this is an issue, and be depressed about it, and we're still going to have the same issue 20 years from now. What you can do is look at, first of all, educate ourselves, educate the people that you work with on the design side as much as possible, but also build workflows that know how to handle these files that come in from Canva or Adobe Express or Microsoft Publisher. There are a lot of tools today that can fix a lot of the common problems, and then you can get going with those files, and they're not so much an issue anymore. There are also initiatives, for example, from the Ghent Work Group, and you can go to gwg.org and just read about it and download it. All of that is free. There are things that the Ghent Work Group does where, for example, there are white papers that say, if you're using these tools, please configure them this way. That will give you the best PDF file coming out of it, and then that PDF file can be handled automatically in a prepress workflow. So this is an existing issue. I don't see this change in the coming years, but I think we can build our workflows so that they are more resilient to deal with these incoming files. We will have to anyway. Second point, and the reason I think that we're seeing more pre-flight issues and more files that have issues and so on, is a changing landscape on the production side. I like this picture on the right very much. This is something that I received at Printing United. Two people coming to the booth at Printing United a couple of years ago, and they had this book with them and said, look here, we had worked together with them, and so this was a present that they had printed, and it's completely customized. It has my name on the cover, it has obviously Penguin on the cover, because it's me, but the inside was also customized, the back flap was customized. This is a really cool thing, yeah? But it points to the fact that we do have a changing landscape, and because of a lot of this personalization that is going on, we have shorter runs and more diverse jobs. And so where perhaps 20 years ago you had, I don't know, 10 jobs per day, you might have 75 jobs per day today. And the run of those jobs is probably going to be shorter, but you have more of them. Yeah? So if you look at your pre-flight workflow, you're going to see more issues simply because you have more files. It's not just about personalization, like what I said before. This is it was a very nice picture, a very nice book, and it has my name on it and whatever, and we think about that when we think about personalization, but it goes much further than that. Yeah? If 20 or 30 years ago or 40 years ago, if you had a birthday party, one of your kids had a birthday party, you might go to a store and buy little stickers so that you could put stickers on the invitation that you would make for this birthday party. Yeah? You would go to the store and there would be 10 types of sticker that you could buy, and that was it. If you do the same thing today, you're probably going to go online. There's plenty of websites where you can order 10 stickers with a particular design because you know your kid likes penguins and it needs to be penguins, and you can put their name on it, and you order one sheet with 10 stickers on it. That is a type of personalization as well, diversification as well, that we didn't have in the past. And again, it contributes to having a lot more small jobs that have to go through workflow. And so if you have issues with files coming in, if you're looking at pre-flight issues, you're going to see more of them because more jobs come in. And then of course, to compound all of that, we have shorter deadlines and dropping margins. Yeah? And that is absolutely the case. So not only do we print more jobs, we also promise customers that they're going to have their stuff 3 days later, and 3 days is actually a long time today. And we're not making that much money on it because we have to be competitive in this global economy. So the landscape that we're operating in has changed significantly over the last 30 years, and that contributes to the fact that yes, we still have issues with files coming in, and because we have more files coming in, we're probably going to have more issues. And then the last point that I want to point to is technology and a disconnect in things. And I believe that there are certainly a lot of areas where we could do the right thing, but we don't. And that again is, we are to blame for that. And I asked, obviously, ChatGPT to create this image about something with a penguin and a watermill. It's a very good illustration of problems with technology. Look at the watermill. I think that traditionally you would hope that the wheel of a watermill would be in the river and not next to the river. So connectivity problems, and I really believe that that is an issue, and I'm doing this in 3 steps again. The first one is that I believe that we set ourselves up for failure. If you want to be depressed, look up websites from printers in your vicinity. Yeah, I don't know, search for printers where you can buy something online, and it's easy to find, and then look at their websites and look at the guidelines that they give people. Yeah, so we print business cards. What should you give us? There are so many printers where the instructions are vague. They are technically incorrect because they are what was right 10 years ago, but not now. They are complex to follow, even for me, and I'm supposed to know something about PDF and Preflight and so on. Yeah? Or the instructions are so simple that there is nothing that you can gain with it. The amount of printers that says, oh, send me a PDF file, is astounding. Yeah? So when you do that, you set yourself up for failure. So if you're a printer, rather than complaining about the fact that the creatives don't know what they're talking about and people use Canva and whatever, ask yourself, do we have clear instructions on the website? People are going to use Canva. They are. There's nothing we can do about it. So why don't we have instructions, at least on the site, that say, if you're going to use Canva, please follow these steps. And then you could say, but no one's going to read that. Well, not everyone's going to read it, but I'm also active in fora online. I was active in the Quark Express fora on Facebook for a very long time. And then you read the story about people who try to communicate with their printer, and the best they can get is send me a PDF file. Yeah? Or send me a PDF X1A, because that's what the printer has been saying for 20 years, and they don't realize that they're actually causing problems now when they ask for that. So instead of blaming other people, let's look at what we can do in our workflow so that the files that come in are actually better. Second thing is, if we're doing Preflight, give feedback immediately. There is no technical reason today that a PDF file should come in and that it should take 2 days before the customer gets the answer, oh, you didn't include all fonts in your PDF, so we will not be able to print it. Yeah? Again, a very common issue, and an issue that is really not necessary. You have the tools today, the technical tools today, to integrate with all kinds of systems, such as web portals and web-to-print systems and so on, where the quality of the file, both from a technical Preflight perspective and an intent Preflight perspective, that verification can be done immediately, very, very quickly, and the customer can know immediately that something is wrong. Remember that graph where the cost of errors that are detected goes up over time? You can avoid a lot of that. Yeah? It is painful to have to go back to a customer 2 days after the fact and say, oh, you know, this file you sent me 2 days ago and that should be printed tomorrow, turns out that there is a problem with it and we didn't see it until now. Yeah? That is not necessary, and I think it's really something that we should, as an industry, that we should work on and improve. And then the third thing is there is such an amazing amount of information that we have in all of our companies, and we very often don't use it. And that goes specifically back to this intent pre-flight point. You can only do intent pre-flight if you know the information about the job. If a PDF comes in and I have no idea, or the pre-flight tool has no idea what this PDF should be, then the pre-flight that I'm going to be doing cannot be ideal. Okay, so what's the conclusion here? Well, I think we could put this negatively, very negatively, but we can also put it positively, and this is the positive spin to it. The important thing to remember is that things definitely have improved. If you think that workflows we had 30 years ago were worse than what we have today, then you're correct. Things have improved. Yeah? And if you don't agree with that, just go back to the slide with all of the really bad stuff that we had to deal with and realize that we don't deal with these things anymore. We now realize with PDF, and we say, yeah, but PDF is not perfect. No, PDF is not perfect, but it's definitely a lot more perfect than a workflow where you receive PageMaker and PostScript and TIFF-IT files. Yeah? So yes, things definitely have improved. At the same time, Preflight remains relevant and necessary. Yeah? And I still believe that. I think everyone who listens to this probably agrees with this as well. And if you don't, then I would love to hear from you, because I would like to understand why you're saying that. What you see in surveys and so on is that, yes, there are always people who are in a very closed workflow and who don't have to do Preflight because they know exactly where the files come from, or they have generated the files themselves with software, and so they are always correct and don't have to be pre-flighted. But the reality for the majority of us is that we're going to get PDF files from somewhere else, and we will need to pre-flight them, and out of that pre-flight we're going to have issues. The reality is also that a lot of those issues can be intercepted automatically, so the customer can be notified automatically and very, very quickly if we set it up correctly, and that a lot of those problems that we detect in PDF files can be fixed automatically as well. Yeah? And so the only thing at that point we need is for the customer to go, okay, this was wrong, you fixed it, this is how the design looks now, this is good, go ahead. And we have, again, we have all the solutions to implement workflows like that. We just have to build them. Okay, that is what I wanted to share with you today. As I said, this is the second webinar in a series of 3 webinars. The first one was about standardization. You can go to the Callas YouTube channel and watch it there, and while you're there, watch all the other interesting webinars and recordings that you find there. This is the second webinar where I wanted to talk about pre-flight and how things have advanced and maybe not advanced. And then in a month on, if I am correct, November 26th, which should be a Tuesday, there is a third webinar, and that third webinar is going to be done by Sarah Nitschmann from Callas, and she's going to talk about pre-flight in a much more practical sense, and going to show a lot more things about how you can do these different types of pre-flight and so on. So that is still to come. You can go to the Callas software website and already register for that third webinar so that you don't forget and it's in your calendar. In the meantime, if you have any questions, there will be a comment form below the video once it's posted on YouTube. Feel free to answer your questions there, or feel free to just send us an email and let's have a discussion. I would look forward to that. Thank you very much for joining and for staying until the end of the video. That is much appreciated. Take a moment when you're on YouTube to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you're notified of additional content that is created. And I will see you again in a next video.